Welcome to There is a Method to the Madness. My name is Rob Maxwell. I'm an exercise physiologist and personal trainer. I'm the owner of Maxwell's Fitness Programs, and I've been in business since 1994. The purpose of this podcast is to get to the real deal of what really works, and most importantly, why things work, or maybe don't work. Today, I'm going to talk to you about the science of nutrition prior to working out, prior to training, prior to maybe sports events that you're going to do. And, we really need to know how to do that. Before I get to that, let me thank Jonathan and Lynn Gilden of the Gilden Group at Realty Pros. They and their team are committed to providing the highest level of customer service in home sales, and they have the sales and the reviews to back that up. Let's talk about pre-workout, pre-training nutrition. There's a lot of misunderstanding with that, just like there is probably in all realms of health and fitness and training and science and all that. It's really a misunderstanding. It's not as contradictory as some people make it out to be. And what I mean is that, the nutrition world isn't as contradictory as it may seem. Now, we are pushed with all kinds of different information that we're seeing on TV and we're seeing on social media. That's probably the biggest medium now. But that doesn't mean they're contradictions. That just means that some people with either limited information are pushing things, or people with information but don't have the best agenda at stake, meaning that they just want to make money with the information. So the real science on nutrition has been actually very stable for many, many years. I mean, sure, there's things that come in and out. There's been differences with food toxicity and pesticides and those kind of things, which have changed over the last decade or so because the information's new. But nutritional science has been a lot more stable than people realize. For example, when I took a nutrition course, my very first nutrition course I took in college was, well over 30 years ago. And we were using the same textbook when I taught the same course 25 years later. And the information had not changed other than some of the government regulations regarding the My Plate and the food pyramid and all that, now they're at My Plate. Before that, it was the pyramid. Before that was 4 food groups. But that's just like government regulations trying to give people some standards to follow. That doesn't mean the nutrition world changed. We've known what a protein is. We know what it does. We know how much you need. We know the best sources. We know what all different forms of carbohydrates are, what they're mostly used for, what their best sources are, how much you need. We know all the different types of fats, how much you need, what the best sources are, and all of the roles of these different macronutrients since I can remember. So it really hasn't changed that much. Again, not to keep kind of going on this, but I just want you to understand that the information, if you go after the right sources, is accurate and very consistent. So what do we know about nutrition? The first thing I want you to understand regarding pre-training, pre-workout, pre-racing nutrition is we have to understand what different macronutrients do. And I've talked about this, so I won't go too on and on about it because I want to make sure you thoroughly understand today's topic. First off, protein has a very limited role in just prior to training, meaning the morning of or whatever, or before a workout snack. Protein has very little role. I'm not saying protein is bad. Protein is good. Protein is needed for recovery. Protein is needed to help our muscles grow. And as I said, recovery. But protein is very hard to digest. It takes roughly 3 to 4 hours for the protein that you ate to be broken down, digested, and absorbed into your bloodstream. That's a long time. If your body is busy trying to digest the meal, the blood actually pools to the stomach to bring energy to help digest, which takes energy away from the working muscles. So we don't want that. So that's what protein does. It's for growth and repair. It is not used except in intense forms of exercise with certain amino acids, the triaminos we call them, will come into effect in very intense exercise sessions, but it's still very, very limited amounts and not worth adding to your pre-game, your pre-training meal. Any protein that is going to be used in the intense exercise or training scenarios can be absorbed via one of those nutrition gels where they actually put the amino acids into the gel. But again, that is really in low chance situations. So I wouldn't even worry about that. Too many people think that they can eat protein or fatty type foods prior to working out and have it benefit them. And I have to tell you, not only does it not benefit you, it hurts you, because the more your body is utilizing energy to digest that meal, and protein and fat are the hardest macronutrients to digest, they take the longest. That's energy being taken away from your working muscles. So we don't want to consume protein type foods prior to working out or prior to racing. If we do 5Ks or triathlons or pickleball tournaments or tennis tournaments or whatever, we don't want to have protein within 3 to 4 hours prior to that. It's not going to do us any good. The next thing we need to understand is that our body pretty much runs on glycogen. So glycogen is stored carbohydrates. We store up to 500 grams of glycogen in our body. We store 400 grams of glycogen in our muscles and 100 grams in our liver. All that is stored carbohydrate. That is the carbohydrate we use for energy. So we think, oh, I'm going to have this snack and I'm going to have instant energy. That's not the way it works. Snacking will increase our blood sugar somewhat, but the energy we're utilizing for movement is going to be coming from your stored glycogen. So if you don't have highly stored glycogen stores, you are not going to have energy, period. Even if you consumed a little snack. Sure, it could be beneficial to get your glucose levels up, to get your blood sugar levels up, especially if you're starting to bonk or crash a little bit, but you're still not going to have the energy. At that point, it's almost too late. So the first thing we have to remember is that if we want to have a good workout, if we want to have a good race, if we want to have a good training day, we have to keep our glycogen levels full. We have to make sure that we're storing the 500 grams or 2,000 calories. Now, how do you know? You don't really know for certain. None of us could know. I mean, that would be awesome to know. But if we are consuming good, high quality, complex carbohydrates as the majority of our diet, such as whole grain breads, rices, whole wheat or spinach, pastas, legumes, lentils, fruits, and vegetables, if we're consuming primarily that, then our glycogen levels are going to be high. So that's the first thing we always have to remember. It's almost like too late if you don't do that. And then you decide morning of a training session, oh, well, I'm going to have a banana and I'm going to get my, my energy. Well, again, you might get a blood sugar spike, which could be good, could be bad too. Like that's not necessarily the way we want energy, but really it's too late. So we have to remember to keep the glycogen levels full. Carbohydrates' job is to give us energy. And the only fuel source we can use during intense exercise is carbohydrate. Now, fat we use for energy too, but here's the deal with fat. We only use fat for very low intensity movement. So almost zero exercise is being propelled by fat. If you're walking around, yes, you're utilizing fat. If you're getting up into the higher ends of aerobic metabolism, you're using carbohydrates and fat, but mostly carbs. If you're strength training, because it is an anaerobic activity, you are only using carbohydrates. So I can't stress enough, all this BS about super low carb diets is simply BS. If you are active, if you are an exerciser, and you're trying to do all this on a low carb diet and you wonder why you don't have any energy or you're not getting results, there's your reason, And again, it's just an argument. I mean, it's a stupid argument because people that have science backgrounds know all this. So the only people arguing about it are the people that don't know it or trying to sell something to you. And it's usually some kind of diet. It's simply easier for them to say, eliminate this to lose weight. And of course, you're eating less, so you lose weight because it takes away the majority of foods that actually taste good. I'm not saying go crazy on carbohydrates. You can't go crazy on any form of macronutrient. Even water, which is a macronutrient, you can go through hyponatremia if you drink too much water. Don't want to scare you. I'm just trying to make a point that we could overconsume anything and gain weight. Not water, but that would have other effects on you. So, of course, we don't go crazy. We have to know, and it's hard, it's a balance, how many grams of carbohydrates or calories we can consume of carbohydrates, have the most amount of energy, and not gain body fat. You can figure it out. I mean, anybody can figure it out. It's just going to take some diligent trial and error and paying attention, and you will figure it out, okay? So the first part again, do not eat protein and fat prior to working out within 3 to 4 hours. And that's rule number 1. Rule number 2, keep your glycogen levels high at all times. And the final rule is, so morning of, keep in mind, if your workout's only going to be, say, an hour or less, you may not have to eat anything as a pregame meal, so to say. Doesn't mean it's bad to do so, because in some cases it's good to get the blood sugar up a little bit. So remember, I talked about the glycogen levels. You have 400 grams in your muscles and 100 grams in your liver. So when you sleep, you typically are burning off that 100 grams of glycogen in the liver, which equates to 400 calories because there's 4 calories per gram of carbohydrate. So you typically burn that off. So you're not really hungry in the morning when you think you are, but because you've burned off your liver glycogen, you tend to have a little bit lower blood sugar and you feel hungry. We call that appetite versus real hunger. And it's, it can be annoying. So it's not bad to have a little bit of carbohydrate before you train, but you may not need to. If the exercise session is going to be longer than an hour, like much longer, you're training for a big event or you have a long tennis, pickleball tournament, something like that, you're definitely going to want to have a pregame meal, so to say. Ideally, it would be best to have it roughly 2 hours before your training, exercise, or tournament racing situation. Because again, if your body's trying to digest a meal, and even though carbohydrates are easier to digest than protein and fat, it is still utilizing energy to digest that. So that's not a great thing. So you definitely want to have some time between when you ate, ideally 2 hours, and your actual training. You're going to want to consume low glycemic carbohydrates, and not a lot, like only about, say, 200 to 300 grams of carbohydrates, or 200 to 300 calories of carbohydrates. So it's not a lot. And it could be like a couple pieces of sourdough toast. It could be one of those and a banana, or maybe a little bit more. But you want to choose nice, slow-burning carbohydrates and have it, again, around 2 hours ahead of time. You don't want to have a sugary type food, because what's going to happen is like jam or jelly or something like that. is you're going to get a blood sugar spike. So you're going to get energetic because your blood sugar is going to raise, but then you're going to crash like 30 minutes later. And you don't want that, right? Going into a workout, you feel sluggish. Well, sometimes that's why. You want to time the glucose as best as possible. So you also have to experiment with foods that work good for you, because like I say, sourdough bread, I mean, it works good for me, but maybe that doesn't sit in your stomach well. So you do want to experiment. All right. So to make this really KISS, keep it simple, silly, just remember, if you're keeping a good level of glycogen up in your body all the time because you're eating a good, slow-burning, complex carbohydrate diet primarily, and you work out for an hour less when you wake up in the morning, you may not consume anything but water. If you feel like your blood sugar levels are a little lower when you wake up and it helps you, yes, have a light carbohydrate snack of slow-burning carbs, easy to digest, and try to have it roughly 2 hours before. And during, if it's really intense training, you can have some of the glucose sports drinks and whatnot, but most people don't need those. But that would be where you'd start to consume what we call the higher glycemic index foods. All right. Nutrition is such a critical part of our training and our fitness and our health that we really have to do a better job of understanding it. So I really hope this helps. And now I want to thank our sponsors, our other sponsors, Overhead Door of Daytona Beach, owned by Jeff and Zach Hawk. Awesome individuals, awesome company. If you're looking for new doors, better doors, or service, give them a shout at overheaddoorsdaytona.com. Please download these shows. Please rate the shows. Give us 5 stars, whether you're listening on Apple Podcast or Spotify. The little ratings help. And share them to your own social media. Okay? Until next time, please be max fit and be max well.